Great. Well, yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Jerry Silverman. Just to give you an introduction to me, I'm a principal solutions consultant here at Adobe Systems Federal. And hopefully you guys can see my screen that has the Digital Publishing Solution kind of splash screen there. Feel free to break in the middle. If there's stuff going on in the room and you guys want to break in and ask a question, please do not hesitate to interrupt me as we keep going. Sound good?
Yep, and also just so you know that the majority of the users here use Adobe products, Creative Cloud, or other. So we're pretty familiar with the tools.
Right. Well, that's actually that's good news to me, being as how the digital publishing solution kind of sits between the creative tools and the marketing cloud tools, or the Adobe Experience Manager that I know you guys are looking at for the CDET e-learning initiatives and kind of for your content management, site management, communities and stuff like that. So DPS kind of really sits in between, where the creatives will go ahead and create very compelling visual content, or be able to do the bulk of the storytelling, whether that's with imagery, with graphics, with layout or web design or stuff like that, and where all of the content can kind of come through, get a little bit more deeply analytical, and be kind of provisioned and managed. So when you look at DPS as a holistic system, right, there are kind of four key concepts. Number one, the engaging nature of the experiences, I would say, is what differentiates DPS not only from the other offerings around Adobe, but also from all the other competing digital publishing solutions that you see out there. Having the mobile apps that can attract the end user's attention, and not only attract it, but keep it, hold on to it, through kind of that second bullet point, which is the flexible publishing and messaging, right? So the things that make an app sticky to your average mobile user, things like robust interactivity, video, and also prompting, messaging, in-app messaging and or OS level messaging, and also refreshed content, the continuous availability of content into that app. So a feeling that the app is actually connected somehow to the source of content rather than always disconnected, right? And so the flexibility inside of DPS is in order to publish as the content is ready and push that content and notify the end user that the content is ready is one of the main differentiators, as well as the analytics that are provided. I'm sure while looking at Adobe Experience Manager, you probably understood a little bit of how those analytics can be manifested in a dashboard to show real-time user engagement, whether or not users are pathing correctly through the web application or through the experience that you want them to get to. And you're also familiar with analytics through your own learning management system. And so DPS has a lot of different hooks into the Adobe Analytics platform that can also be integrated with the analytics that you're looking at right now. So any questions before we keep going?
Nope.
Great. Well, so just to talk a little bit more about those engaging experiences, we actually just iterated upon the Digital Publishing Suite. It's been out as a product since 2011, and it was originally targeted at the magazine publishers. If you've been following the tech press for that amount of time, you'll know that Wired magazine and Condé Nast was the first big customer of the Digital Publishing Suite, and they actually co-developed the product with Adobe. And understanding their use case, which was going from a printed magazine to a digital tablet-based publication, the paradigm for interacting and for containing that content was really more based in a magazine paradigm, right? The individual folio would comprise what would be an issue of the magazine. And so the initial concept of the library or the storefront that would be presented to an end user when they downloaded and installed and opened an application that was built on Adobe DPS would really kind of approximate what you'd expect from a newsstand or from a magazine rack that had a number of different issues of your magazine that were available for you to consume. But I think what we found over time, what our customers found and what Adobe found, is that not everybody wants to serve content like it's a magazine. They might want to do it more piecemeal or more in a more ersatz fashion, where not just complete folios are ready, but maybe individual articles or individual pieces of content within that folio are available. And so what we've done is made the experience of accessing content much more flexible and much more accessible to the end user, right? And so having an authoring experience for graphic designers and for publishers wherein they can not only author the article content, but they can actually author the entire experience of the application is very powerful. And it's something that up until this point was not really available. You kind of had to have some real HTML development expertise built in-house in order to create a library or a storefront that was at all customized. But now through the tools inside of the digital publishing solution, designers without a great deal of knowledge about coding or HTML can create some pretty interesting, unique storefront and library interfaces like the one that you see here that feature content that are not necessarily locked down into what you would consider a magazine type of content. So in other words, the library or the storefront that we see right here has a number of different types of content, right? It has a collection of different articles, it has a video, one individual article, it even has an ad, which I know is not apropos of e-learning necessarily, but maybe a banner advertising new available content could be a particular use case. So I'm not going to go through all the features because we're going to look at this via kind of an example demo. But I think the best way to conceive of what we're going to go about and show is thinking of a basic unit of content, which in our paradigm is called an article, right? And so this article can be comprised of an InDesign composition, or it can be comprised of HTML and CSS and JavaScript, right? So it'll contain any text or imagery or interactivity that can be imparted by InDesign or by HTML5, and that content can be pushed directly into an app that you would build on the DPS platform. And then those collections of articles can be kind of curated. So what you'll see is, right, this is the old paradigm where articles would be grouped into a folio, and only articles that were appropriate to that folio would be grouped, right? So you'd have, you'd have folio A and folio B, but now what we have is called collections. So you can take folios, or you can take articles from a number of different sources and just kind of put them together into collections, such as, maybe regional or national or annual or something like that. So the collections of content can be much more topical than they ever were before, right? You can nest collections within other collections. And as I was saying, this content can be either pixel-perfect, fixed layout content that comes from InDesign. We also have a plugin for PowerPoint that will allow you to assemble PowerPoint presentations into DPS articles that can be uploaded into the service. We also have a number of responsive layout tools like Dreamweaver and Muse that will generate HTML5, right, whether you're using a Bootstrap framework or some other responsive template. Or you can author content using Adobe Experience Manager, sites, or assets. And through that automated connection, you can create articles directly from within AEM apps and push those articles directly into an app that is being managed by the Digital Publishing Suite. So pretty nice, pretty advanced, and we can talk about what the advantages are between fixed layout, right, pixel perfect content, and reflowable smooth scrolling. But I think probably the best way to visualize that would be to just go over to an example app. So I'm just going to go over here to my phone. So what you're seeing here is just a regular iPhone. And I'm going to go out and show you an example of an app that I've created, right? Just my sample app. It's called Launchy. So I'll just hit it. It's got a nice splash screen, nice icon. And so what you see that I have in here is a number of kind of example articles. I've also got a collection, and I've got another collection here called reference materials, right? So if I go into the blue collection, I've got a number of blue-based articles. If I go ahead and tap blue article, you'll notice that this is kind of typical scrolling content. I'm just scrolling with my index finger here. And right, this looks a little bit more like your standard HTML content. It's not too exciting and not particularly interactive. But when I come back out here to my Avionics on the Fly article, you'll notice that I've got some pillar boxing kind of at the bottom and top, because this content is not reflowable HTML content. This is actually InDesign content. So as I scroll this up, you'll notice I've got a slideshow that is kind of scrolling through the slideshow content in the background there, right? And of course, I can pinch and zoom and go into that pixel perfect content, but this is locked to a particular page size for a page that was created in InDesign. So if I take a look at how that looks in InDesign, right? This is just your average InDesign document. I go into my document setup here, right? So this is just a 768 by 1024, portrait-oriented document. And as I scroll down, right, there is that slideshow that I had. So the slideshow is comprised of a number of different objects, right? State 1, State 2, and State 3. And when I select it and I have my overlays panel activated in InDesign, you'll notice that this slideshow is set to crossfade every 0.5 seconds. I could also swipe to change the image. It's going to autoplay, and it's also going to loop at the end because I've got the loop button checked, right? So InDesign provides these easy ways to create these very engaging experiences. But slideshow is just one of a number of different interactive overlays that can be applied right here in InDesign by someone who is not a professional coder or professional, HTML5 developer who needs to know all the different JavaScript libraries to do this type of thing. Right? So these are all overlaid very simply in InDesign. If you go into something like Dreamweaver, right? So this is where one of many of Adobe's authoring environments where HTML can be created. And so here is that blue article that we were looking at, right? And so this was created using the Bootstrap Framework. And so you see it is responsive. So if this, for example, might have, 2-column layout, it goes down to 1. So the advantage, again, of doing HTML or creating responsive HTML is, as you can see, if we were to take this app and put it onto the iPad, then that content would scale to the iPad size automatically. Whereas here, with our InDesign document, this content, if you look at it on a phone, right, as we did before, right, it's still 768 by 1024, so it's not going to kind of scale automatically. It's going to do that pillar boxing or letter boxing. And so let me go ahead and pause before we keep going into the authoring experience of how we actually made this app and got it onto the phone. So let me go ahead and pause and see if we have questions.
Nothing yet. I think that we've already started playing with it a little bit, and we did have some problems or questions about once we had the app built, how to get it onto the device.
Okay. So yeah, and that's really going to depend, Larry, I think on which platform you're building for and how you're provisioned, right? So the example of the app that I have here, right? I'm a member of the iOS developers program, and so when you're building apps, like this Launchy app, so you need credentials in order to be part of the developer program, and then once you're part of the program, they issue you a number of different, you get some profiles, or otherwise known as provisioning profiles, right? So if I go into resources here and I look at my certs and profiles, one of the things that I'm issued as an iOS developer is a developer mobile provision. If I were to distribute this, I'd get a distribution mobile provision, and then you have to generate your P12 certificate. And so over here in the, I'm looking right here at the DPS straight up dashboard, right? This is when you sign up for DPS and you come in to provision your team, right? So let's say, Larry, goes through with the DPS solution contract, gets the email, says, welcome to Digital Publishing Solution, please log in. Right, this is the first thing that Larry or whoever is assigned as the admin is going to see. And over here on the left-hand side are basically all the controls, wherein which you can start designating the members of your team, right? So if I go into master settings, I go into roles, right? So I've got an everything role, I've got a developer role. If I wanted to make a new role, right, let's call it educational publisher, right? So under educational publisher, here's where I can go ahead and say what that publisher is going to have the rights to do, right? So maybe they could add and edit content, but not delete content. They could view, they could publish. Actually, let's just let them view and publish, since we're calling them a publisher. And they could also send text notifications and push certificates and view the notification history, right? So they'd be able to see how many times an in-app message or an OS-based message was sent, which might affect when and how they publish the content. So let's go ahead and say save, right? So now we've got an educational publisher role, and we can go in and start a new project, right? So the project that I have right now is called Launch, and Launch is comprised of a team, right, of users. And I could go in now and click on the users. Now notice that I've only have one user right now, and that user has not necessarily been assigned, but I can go in to my project, click here, and invite whomever I want and assign them a role, right? And I'm not sure why I'm not allowed to edit my own self right here, but I would go in and invite somebody and then assign them a role as a publisher, a project manager, or a content contributor, or so on. Now this project, I could have an app or several apps associated with it, and I could have a number of different types of content and layout associated with it. When I go into apps, you'll see over here that right now I've only got one app, right, which is called Launch. And this is all, so I sent this around to Larry. I'm sure if you're already playing around with it, you probably already have this content, but there is a place where you can download sample assets and the quick start guide to kind of get you started in using the exact assets that I'm showing right now. But what you do in order to build an app is you go in and you say, well, I'd like this to be iOS. You say next, you put in all of your metadata. Now, what's important is that the bundle ID that you have listed here matches the bundle ID. If you're making an iOS app, I assume that's what you're making. And I probably shouldn't assume that.
No, you can assume that. All right. We're the organization that has the Developers Enterprise Program, so we're self-signing our own apps.
Okay, so making sure that the bundle ID of your app matches the bundle ID that you have provided in the the Apple developer portal, that's super important. That's basically what's going to link the app that you develop to the content that you push out. right? If you get the bundle ID wrong, then basically the DPS won't know which app to push the content to. So you have to make sure that those strings are identical. And you also, in order to, right, if you're building a development app, you have to make sure to, right, the preview on device for unpublished content, right? So you have to enable preview in order for the content to be previewable on the test app that you have, right? So, and here is where you would upload your app icons, your splash screens for all the different resolutions, and the resolutions are listed there. And part of those sample assets that you download is actually a Photoshop, PSD template that allows you to size all of your splash screens and icons so that you can basically just get started really easily here. So I've already got this done for launch, for Launchy, right, my app. And so what I do is download this unsigned app, and then I would use this tool called the Adobe DPS App Signing Tool, which is part of the downloads, right? And I would just select the application, give it my mobile provisioning file, select the P12, and put in my password, and it would go ahead and sign that app. And then, there's a number of different ways of getting the app actually onto the test device. The way that I do it is just by opening up iTunes and syncing the phone to the iTunes desktop and making sure that the app is selected to be synced over to the device. So, and all of this is all, kind of documented in the, if you go to the Getting Started guide or even in the Quick Start guide, right? So the steps for getting the app actually onto the device are documented there kind of one by one. And, I'd say out of all the developers that you could build apps with, right, Windows, iOS, or Android, I'd say iOS definitely makes it the most difficult to get it right. There's just so many steps that you have to go through. But once you actually get in there and build it, and, it's going to be this way whether you're working with AEM apps or with PhoneGap or with DPS or, or even if you're writing Xcode, building apps that get content pushed to them is Apple definitely has a number of hoops for you to jump through. So, pause again. Are there more questions, or?
We do have a question, Jerry.
Sure.
Hi, this is Laura. I downloaded the 30-day trial, and I went through the Quick Start guide and did all those steps that you just went through, and I successfully made the app, and I was able to put it on the device, but it's just an empty app at this point. So I have some content that I uploaded, and I have the articles, and I have the collections, but I guess where I was having trouble is how do I populate the app with my content?
Right. So are you using this button up here that says Preview All Content Collections and Layouts on Device?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was a mistake at the very first. When I was doing the Quick Start, that was the step that I was missing. That I think a lot of people kind of missed the first time around. Right. You select you select the content that you want to preview. Or actually, if you've got content, already pushed into a collection or something like that, then you click Preview All Content and go into the app, and it should preview. Okay. And if you checked to make sure that the bundle ID, right, that was the second place that there was failure.
That's one that I will check. I thought I had that correct, I noticed that in the Quick Start guide, but I will double check that as well.
Yeah, those are the two biggest hangups that I've found. Is the bundle ID being off by either having the reverse domain not correct or or just not actually selecting the preview, or again, in the actual app settings, making sure that enable preview is selected, right? So I'm sure you probably had that, but enable preview, that checkbox, and this one isn't even checked off, right? But making sure that before you go through and build the app and download it and certify it, If that's not checked, then it's not going anywhere.
Okay.
So, right, that's the building of apps. The getting of content into the the actual player into the DPS is also pretty easy, right? You just say add new content. I'd like to add an article. You put in some example metadata, and under under the content tab, you just say what that content is going to be, right? So for this article in particular, right, we already have a content file, which is an HTML file, and we uploaded kind of an article image or a card, that will be displayed as the kind of default card. We put in some metadata. We say whether the article importance is high or low or medium, right? We put in some author metadata, or we put some categories or keywords that could potentially all be searchable. If we have social sharing enabled, we have an URL here that we can share, so that if social sharing is turned on, that content can be shared socially, and that's pretty much it. So, I know that looking at this platform, you're thinking, well, how does this actually apply to the franchise of e-learning, right, of training, right? Because this is really more of a publishing solution and not so much a learning management system, like Moodle or any of the other kind of LMSs that you might be familiar with or might be using. So one of the example use cases that Adobe has been tracking has been kind of that corporate training, right? And so we have a number of examples of companies like Dannon, REI, Vivint, Patty, a number of different universities that have already kind of taken up the mantle of creating tablet and phone-based training content, and that have done some pretty compelling case studies, right? Now, they're obviously not training Marines. They are, a lot of them are doing education for marketing organizations or sales organizations, or Vivint has one where they're training technicians, right? They do smart home technology like Nest, and they also have home security and energy management, right? All that automation type of stuff, and so they have to train their field technician organization, and so they applied DPS and saw some great benefits to that. Also teaching scuba divers, right? And also University of Texas actually using this for course curriculum. So there's a lot of great examples of this, and so much so that Adobe has created its own kind of DPS learning management system integration, such that somebody using an LMS can actually tie in with the back-end entitlement system of DPS, right? As I was kind of illustrating before, one of the rich capabilities that we have is allowing authoring to come in from a number of different places. So we have this very flexible content API where if you're using a Woodwing or a K4 system, if you're using WordPress, Drupal, AEM, or some other proprietary workflow, right? Any of these applications can be used to author content that can be pushed to DPS, right? And so the example that we have for e-learning is for an LMS that you guys are probably not using, right, the open source Moodle platform. But I think what it shows is that extensibility par excellence. And it's the thing that I think to pay attention to in this very short demo is the flow between pixel perfect content that's coming in from InDesign and HTML content that might be coming in from the learning management system, right? And which in your case would be AEM. So as you see, the very first interface that the end user could have to the app would not be this custom storefront, but would be a login screen that would tie directly into the LMS that would allow them to have this kind of customized storefront experience where they could pull down articles, they could pull down collections, they could pull down folios, right? In this particular example, the end user is going to pull down the Universal Life Policies folio, and they're going to go through and tap through some of these examples, right? The policy overview that you see on the upper right, this entire menu and the articles that are part of this collection were authored in InDesign, right? So you see that kind of pixel perfect, it's beautiful, nice looking, and kind of predictable for a designer to create this content. So if we go back, into another, right, this is a retirement products overview. We look at some of the personal plans, we see we've got a nice multi-state object showing us the table of the content there. And then when it's time to go through and take a quiz, there's a button that says take a quiz, right? And that's going to kick you out directly into the LMS, right? So what we see here is this is kind of a what's called WebKit implementation that comes directly into the app. So instead of kicking you out of the app, it's keeping you in the in-app experience, right? It's when you're finished, you've just tapped done, but we've got a nice kind of WebKit skin that shows us the LMS and shows us the HTML-based quiz that's going on inside the LMS that'll record this individual logged in user's responses and give them a grade and give them all the kind of responsivity that they need, right? So in your example, right, AEM would be the HTML surface that is providing you with the the quizzing and the data and the evaluation, the assessment. So once that's all finished and the end user taps done, they would come back and they'd have a uniform experience. Now on the back end, let's say the learning management professional sees that John Smith, the person who's logged in here, has passed his assessment. So now it's time to assign him another couple of courses, right? So that learning manager would come into the AEM dashboard and say, all right, we need to assign some internal compliance training and or security training. So they would associate the course ID number with that back-end entitlement system in DPS, and they could just go in and enroll John Smith, right? They go in and enroll John as a user who needs to be enrolled. Now, when John comes back to his iPad, immediately there is new content available in the storefront for him to go ahead, download, and click through and learn, right? So having that integration directly between the LMS and the application so that content, relevant content can be pushed in a dynamic fashion from the back end into the app is, I think that's a big differentiator for DPS. And it's just going to make the experience of receiving and consuming the content a lot more sticky. Let me go ahead and pause and see if you guys have questions.
Nope, nothing right now.
Okay. Am I tracking towards what we covered before there, Larry?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, okay, good. And I only have a little bit more before, we can kind of just open up the floor. Because like I said, I didn't want to spend too much time on the other customer case studies, right? That's documentation that I can send you. We looked at the e-learning case, but understanding the analytics around how those end users are actually getting through the content is another way to improve the e-learning experience. So for example, if you ship out a tablet app to 500 users and only 300 of them download it, and only 200 of the downloaders actually download a course, and only 100 of those make it through the course, and you have an ability to see where all of the fallouts are in terms of where people get tripped up, where they stop, where they get stuck, where they basically fall out, is stuff that you can see in the analytics dashboard that's part of the digital publishing solution. So things like how many times the app was launched, how many times we're calling it a browse page, but really it's a menu or a library, right? So how many times that library was actually viewed, how many individual articles were viewed, which ones were viewed more, how much time was spent on each of them, and was any of that content shared? Who has notifications turned on, or what percentage of users allowed in-app notifications to be turned on? And of course, conversion funnel and ad impressions doesn't really relate to you as e-learning, but that type of stuff is available as well. And there's a deeper kind of more custom drill down reporting that can be integrated with the rest of your AEM instance with Adobe Analytics. Gives you a bit more holistic around all the aspects of your business. But that's kind of the next level. And let me see. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the long, tall, and short of the DPS pitch. If there are specific examples you'd like me to dive into, I'm happy to. But really, I just want to hear what questions you guys have.
I got one question on, you talked about DPS sitting between the Creative Cloud and the AEM. As you're showing the app, it appears, at least to me, like sometimes the app is interfacing with web-based content, and sometimes it's downloaded and content on the device. Is that decided within DPS, within AEM, or where does that occur?
Yep. So that's a great question, and that is basically decided by you. So if you're going to provide an experience where the web is necessary, right? So for example, let's say, in here in InDesign, we wanted to turn this into a hyperlink or a web content frame, right? Such that when you tap on that frame, a URL will be invoked and content will fill that frame coming from the website. Then that's a decision that you make during authoring time to say, all right, dynamic content is going to be pulled in here, right? But from the end user's perspective, every time they go into, and I have to put my, there we go, right? So, from this app's perspective, every time I choose to pull in content, that content is going to come in when I choose it, right? So right now, the red article content just got downloaded, and now it's local on my device, right? So the next time I come in, I don't have to download it, but all of the content is going to be basically loadable in the same way that you saw, from that example that I just showed. When somebody chooses a little bit of content, right? That content does require some time to kind of download, right? There's that little progress bar in there. So the same with any of these apps. Once you've actually brought the content in, then you don't have to wait any longer, right? I'm sorry, the content is there locally on the device and it can be brought offline. But the baking any of this content into the app itself, so that when the app is downloaded, that content is preloaded into the app. So that's actually not, that was available in the previous form of DPS, and we're working in the latest iteration of DPS to get that back in. But the current model means that you have to get the app, then you have to get the content. Once you get that content, it's local on your device, unless that content has a specific requirement to call out, right? So, you know, in this example, for the InDesign file, if you put in a web content frame, right, and you said, I want this to call out to the LMS and bring up that live quizzing environment, then obviously the end user would have to be online to pull in that quiz content.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a quick question. So you were talking about collecting data from the app, like how many times the app's been downloaded. Is this just generic data that you're collecting, or can we set what data is collected from the app?
So there is a kind of a set amount of data that is, so these metrics here, right, the initial app engagement, the kind of follow-up app engagement, and some of the business metrics. So that stuff just comes out of the box. You know, all these types of analytic content are going to be collected, you know, by default. If you need that level of kind of drop-down granularity, and you need to kind of integrate that with other channels and, you know, kind of set up your dashboard exactly the way that you want to see it and customize your analytics dashboard, so that's going to require deeper integration with Adobe Analytics, which is not out of the box.
Understood.
Anyone? I think there's a lot of wheels turning here, but I don't see any questions.
Right. Well, so one of the things that might interest you is, and so we've seen a lot of interest from you know, government customers on this particular point, is that HTML content that is uploaded into the Digital Publishing Suite apps is now finally accessible via WCAG 2.0. Right? So if you have users who need to use the voiceover command on you know, iOS or some of the screen reader capabilities that are in Android or Windows, so that content is finally surfaceable inside of these apps. That's something that many government customers have asked for a long time, that we weren't able to deliver until we kind of re-architected the digital publishing solution. And now that we've done that, it's you know, we've actually seen significant interest from a number of federal agencies who, you know, up until now just weren't able to, you know, look seriously at the solution.
So just taking a little bit of a step back, as far as you said that we could pull assets in from AEM, Drupal, and other content management systems. So in other words, if I have like a course set up or a community of interest, you know, whatever, that I have digital assets up, I can just go in, build an app, and associate those assets that are already current in the system to my DPS app, correct?
Yep, that's correct. And we actually have, Larry, we have a video. I'm not sure if I sent this to you, but it's a you know, it's kind of an overview of what that integration looks like, right? So if you have your, you know, AEM kind of community set up, and you have digital publishing solutions set up, right? So you've got, let's say, you've built a whole bunch of HTML articles, you've built a whole bunch of InDesign-based articles in DPS, and you also want HTML content from AEM to populate inside of this article list so that you can include these articles in some of the AEM-based content, you know, within your collections. So as you see here, right, in AEM, when you go into the apps panel, right, you can actually create your own DPS-based app directly inside AEM apps, right? So after you enter the metadata and give that all, everything that you need, and connect the AEM, right? There's a little bit of back-end work that has to happen between AEM and DPS, right? You basically, just inside of AEM, give the credentials for the digital publishing account, and then, here inside of AEM apps, you can actually manage the, right, so this is, what you're seeing here is the connection between AEM and DPS, and then you can actually go ahead and, manage articles that will populate into DPS, and you can author articles specifically right inside of sites and assets that will flow into this article list that you can then push directly into DPS. So it's not just the individual pieces of content, right, the articles, but it's also the collections, right? So notice, AEM doesn't really have the concept so much of, collections of articles so much. That's a pretty standard DPS topic. So if I went in and said, I want to create an article, right, for my DPS app, I'm right here inside of AEM, right? I don't necessarily have Dreamweaver or InDesign or any of those tools on my desktop. All I have is a web browser, and I'm a licensed author inside of AEM. So I can go ahead, create that content. I can, put in my metadata image. I can, select from content that I want to be part of that, the card that's part of the article. Actually do a search inside and through the assets. And then when I'm done, actually go ahead and do the article authoring. I'm not sure why it's getting stuck here. But, oh, there we go. Right, so we made that article, right? There it is. And the source, you can see that the source is listed as AEM and not as DPS. So we've gone through, we can now publish this or upload it directly into DPS. So what you'll see, right, we've made that article, and notice that it pops up directly in the article list for DPS. So what we weren't seeing here was the actual article authoring, which you guys are familiar with. You've probably seen that presentation before, right? You create the article, let's see, right, you've got copy, you've got an image, let's see, where's the article authoring, right, where you actually put it together in the HTML-based interface. But so anyway, regardless, you publish it, you say, I'm going to upload this into DPS, and it appears right over here in your list of articles. So there's a direct link between article creation in AEM and where that can be included in your collections, or directly inside of the library storefront in DPS. And so, double-clicking in there, oh, here we go. So, the end user is double-clicking in there, and now he's going to actually, make the content. So he'll go in, grab some images, grab some assets, pull in the copy, right? Everything that you know that you can do in AEM assets and AEM sites, right? So do all of the authoring, get it done. Once that copy is found, and once everything is basically in HTML to the liking of the end user or of the copy editor. Let's keep on. Guess my video is getting a little stuck, but you get how it works.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
I guess any question not answered is a stupid question, right? One of the you talk about, I think I'm using the right terminology. The articles, one of the input is HTML.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to be HTML5, or any HTML is fine?
It'll take any HTML. I think HTML5 is kind of the buzzword that we use because earlier versions of HTML did not necessarily support the features inside of CSS and JavaScript that would allow you to do reflowable or responsive design, or allow some of the rich features that CSS provides, coloring, shading, layout, typography, and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, you can take any HTML, and the way that you do this is, on Mac and Windows, there's basically an application called the Adobe DPS, let's see, where is it? Oh, no, I think it's just called the HTML article packager. So, that's pretty agnostic, right? You just take any old HTML that folder that you have and drop it onto this packager, and it's going to create a .article file, right? So if you look here inside of my resources, we've got, let's see, where is the Bootstrap? There we go, right? So my HTML article is here. All I would have to do is take this folder and drag it onto that application or open it with that application and create this .article file. And the .article file is what you wind up uploading into DPS that will represent it. And that's actually how in InDesign, right, so this content, you just say File, Export, and you say Export as a DPS article, right, instead of all the other different types of content, right? It just makes a .article file.
Okay. Good.
All right.
Any more? Applicability questions? No?